संसारदाभाललितलोकं प्रणयकारुण्यागनाघनात्वम् प्राप्तस्य कल्याणगुणार्णवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् महाप्रभु कीर्तन नित्यगीत्या वादित्रमाद्यन् मनसोरसेना रोमाञ्चकम्पश्रुतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीविघ्नराराधननित्यनाना शृङ्गारतन्मन्दिरमर्चनादो युक्तस्य भक्तं शनिञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसादो स्वादन्नतृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गान् तृप्तैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्नाम् प्रतीक्षणा स्वाधनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जयो नो रतिकेलिसिद्ध्यै यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्राधिदक्ष्यादतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् साक्षाद्धरेत्वेन समस्तशास्त्रैर्युक्तस्तथा भाव यत एव सद्भिः किन्तु प्रभुर्या प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायन्तु वंस्तस्य यशस्त्रिसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् 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 नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नित्य नामिने प्रभुपाद नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद चैतन्य नित्यानंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद चैतन्य नित्यानंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद चैतन्य नित्यानंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hariharaya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudana, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohana. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada. जय ओम विष्णुपाद परवरिष्ठाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतः श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय ओम विष्णुपाद परवरिष्ठाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतः श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी ठाकुर महाराज की नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। राधा कृष्ण श्याम कुंड गोपीनाथ की जय। गंगा यमुना की जय। भक्ति देवी तुलसी देवी की जय। साम वेद भक्त वृंद की जय। युग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद ट्रांसेंडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlad Daine. हिरण्यकाशी पूर्वक्षः शीलठंखा नखालाये इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहा यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा बहिर्नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरेणाकाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गां धालिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे नरसिंहदेव केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह भक्त प्रहलाद जय प्रभुपदा नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय प्रभुपदा गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव भक्ति विघ्न विनाशक लक्ष्मी नरसिंहदेव भगवान की जय भक्तराज प्रहलाद महाराज की जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी એ તો મારા શરણ લોય, તારા વાંચા પૂર્ણ હોય. કૃપા કોરી કરો તારે વૃંદાવનવાસી. કોરી કરો તારે મોર એ અભિલાષ વિલાસ કુંજ દિયો વાસ. નયને હરિબો સાદા યુગલ રૂપરાસી. હે નિવેદન ધરો શકીરનું ઘટ કરો. હે નિવેદન ધરો શકીરનું ઘટ કરો. સેવા અધિકાર દિયે કરો નિજ દાસી. સેવા અધિકાર દિયે કરો નિજ દાસી. દીન કૃષ્ણ દાસે કોઈ ના મોરા હોય. દીન કૃષ્ણ દાસે કોઈ ના મોરા હોય. શ્રી રાધા ગોવિંદ પ્રેમે સાદાયણ બાસી. શ્રી રાધા ગોવિંદ પ્રેમે સદાયન બાસી. યાની કાની ચા પાપાની બ્રહ્મ હત્યાદિકાની ચા તાની તાની પ્રાણશ્યંતિ પ્રદક્ષિણા પદે પદે. यानी कानी च पापानि ब्रह्म हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे. यानी कानि च पापानि ब्रह्म हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे. हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे. हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. तुलसी महारानी जय, तुलसी महारानी जय, वृंदा देवी जय, वृंदा देवी। तुलसी महारानी जय, तुलसी महारानी जय, वृंदा देवी जय, वृंदा देवी। Thus within my vision I shall behold the beautiful pattern Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me follow Karha Danso's virgin. Please give me the privileged devotional service and make me my own maid servant. This very fallen lowly servant of Krishna prays. May I always swim in the love Shri Radha and Govinda. Srimati Tulsi Maharani ki jai. There are 10 fences in the matter of chanting holy names that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the name of the demigods like Lord Shiva or Brahma to be called independent name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Veda literature or literature pursuing the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities and strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities, offering the Veda the fruity activities, karma, ganda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about glorious holy name. 10. To not complete faith in chanting holy names, and to maintain material attachment in understanding. So many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses. In order to achieve desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just deities who can fulfill to everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Cheto Darpana Marjanam Pavamahadavakni Nirvapanam Shriya Kairava Chantrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Pudivardhanam Pratipadam Purunarmita Sadhanam Sarvatmasnapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranina Kalaha Etadishi Tava Kripa Bhagavam Mamapi Durudevami Disham Yahajanina Nurakaha Trinatapi Sunijena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Satahalihi Na Thanam Na Chanam Na Sundarim Kavitam Vajagadisha Kamaye Mama Jammani Jammanishware Bhavata Bhaktir Haituki Tavai Ai Nanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Maham Vishame Bhavam Puta Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stithaturi Satisham Vichintaya Nayanam Kaladashuru Taraya Vatanam Katkata Rudaya Kira Pulaka Nichitam Vapur Kata Tava Nama Karhane Bhavishati Yuga itam nimishena chakrusha pravisha itam shunya itam jagat sarvam govinda virahena me ashlisha va padaratam pinnastumam adarshana marmhatam karotu va yatha tatha va vitatha tu lampato mat prananathastu sa eva na paraha
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Glory to Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes fire of conditional life or repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it expresses the reason of benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone grants all benediction to human beings. Thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govind. In these transcendental names, they have vested all your transcendental energies. They are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out kindness enables us to easily approach you by holy name, but I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tall than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor to desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion service, birth after birth. O Son of Mahajananda Krishna, I'm your eternal servitor, yet somehow I fall in the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death, and place me at one Adam or lotus feet. Oh my Lord, while my eyes bedecked with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant the holy name, while my voice choke up or hair, my body stand and the recitation of your name. Oh Govinda, feeling of separation comes in a moment to be like a great millennium. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything, everything, for he is always my worshipable Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Shri Mangala Charna prayers ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshum Litam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Suyam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakham Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachadya Shatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varshabhani Devi Daitaya Kripaptaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayine Prabhavin Namaha Madhuryojala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktita Shri Gaura Karana Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Pasiddhanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gorakishoraya Sasha Vairagya Murtaye Vipalambara Sambodhe Padam Pujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bhumistwan Nirdishta Sajana Priyaha Vaishnava Savabhauma Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha Pancha Tattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakham Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Sratoro Pangor Mama Mandar Matergati Masarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vindarana Kalpadumadaha Shimadrana Singhasanasto Shimadradha Shila Govinda Devo Prishtari Bi Sevimano Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsi Vata Tatastita Karsham Venu Suner Gopir Gopinatha Shri Yestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Dhadara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Mangalacharna prayers ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita prayers ki jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadhiradhya Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam Chintamani Parakara Sadmasukha Praviksha Lakshariteshu Surabhi Rabi Palayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasam Paramasevymanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Venum Kavanantam Aravinda Talayataksam Parharvatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Gantarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Anlola Chantakala Savanamada Vamshi Ranang Kadam Panayakeli Kala Vilasam Shaman Tripanga Lalitam Niyata Prakasham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pashanti Panti Karayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chimmaya Satu Chila Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Advaitam Achotam Anadi Mananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedeshu Durabam Adurabam Atma Bhakta Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Pantastu Koti Shatavassara Sampragami Vayurathapi Manaso Muni Pungavanam Sopyasti Yaprapada Simya Vichinta Tatve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Ekopya Sora Chaitum Jagatanta Kotim Yachakti Rasti Jagatanta Chayaya Tantaha Antantarastha Paramanu Chayantarastham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Yad Bhava Bhavitatiyo Manujastateva Samprapya Rupa Mahimasana Yana Pusha Suktaryam Eva Nikama Patitaistu Vanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Ananda Chimmarasa Patibhavitapi Stapiya Evan Jarupa Taya Kalapi Goloka Eva Nivasati Kilatma Bhutto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Primanjana Churta Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sateva Hitayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sunda Machintya Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Priyamadi Murtishu Kalanya Mena Tishtan Nanavatara Makaro Puvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhava Parama Pumam Yu Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all, and he has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamasundara is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and his thirst full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of the transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha. Yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities in the company of her confidant Sakhis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by the ever blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shyamasundara Krishna himself with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna in the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrisimha, Vamana, etc. as his subjective portion. Bhagavad Gita 7.1. शृण्वतां स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तनः हृदयन्ता हि स्तौहि अभद्राणि विदुनोति सुहृत्सतं नष्टप्रयेष्व अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भागवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैस्तिकी तदा राजस्तमो भावात् कामलोभादयश्च ये चेत एतैरनाविदं सितं सत्त्वे प्रसीदति एवं प्रसन्नमनसो भगवद्भक्तियोगतः भगवत्तत्त्वविज्ञानं मुक्तसङ्गस्य जायते विद्यते हृदयग्रन्थे छिद्यन्ते सर्वसमस्या क्षीयन्ते च कर्माणि दृष्टा एवात्मनीश्वरे. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lusts and avarice are diminished. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the signs of God perfectly. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the heart knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of Asamsayam Samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of Godhead. Bhagavad Gita 1.2.17 to 21. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the signs of Krishna. Bhagavad Gita 2.19. या एनं वेत्ति हन्तारां यश्चैनं मन्यते हतम् उभौ तौ न विजानीतो नायं हन्ति न हन्यते. Translation: Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge, for the self slays not nor is slain. Purport: when an embodied living entity is hurt by fatal weapons, it is to be known that the living entity within the body is not killed. The spirit soul is so small that it is impossible to kill him by any material weapon, as will be evident from subsequent verses. Nor is the living entity killable. Because of his spiritual constitution, what is killed or is supposed to be killed is the body only. This, however, does not at all encourage killing of the body. The Vedic injunction is Ma Himsayat Sarva Bhutani. Never commit violence to anyone, nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjuna, however, is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsically. Bhagavad Gita 2.20 Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya ajo nitya sasvatoyam purano na hanyamane sarire. Translation: For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Purport: Qualitatively, the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme Spirit is one with the Supreme. He undergoes no changes like the body. Sometimes the soul is called the steady or kutastha. The body is subject to 6 kinds of transformations. It takes its birth from the womb of the mother's body, remains for some time, grows, produces some effects, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is not born, but because he takes on a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth also has death, and because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, present, or future. He is eternal, ever existing, and primeval. That is, there is no trace in history of his coming into being. Under the impression of the body, we seek the history of birth, etc., of the soul. The soul does not at any time become old as the body does. The so called old man, therefore, feels himself to be in the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul does not deteriorate like a tree nor anything material. The soul has no byproduct either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are also different individual souls, and owing to the body, they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoots nor change. Therefore, the soul is free from 6 changes of the body. In the Kada Upanishad 1.2.18, we also find a similar passage which reads, Na jayate mriyate va vipasin nayam kutaschinna bhuva kaschit ajo nitya sasvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sarire. The meaning and purport of this verse is the same as in the Bhagavad Gita, but here in this verse there is one special word, vipaschit, which means learned or with knowledge. The soul is full of knowledge, or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is a symptom of the soul. Even if it does not find the soul within the heart, where he is situated, one can still understand the presence of the soul simply by the presence of consciousness. Sometimes we do not find the sun in the sky owing to clouds, or for some other reason, but the light of the sun is always there, and we are convinced that it is there for daytime. As soon as there is little light in the sky early in the morning, we can understand that the sun is in the sky. Similarly, since there is some consciousness in all bodies, whether man or animal, we can understand the presence of the soul. This consciousness of the soul is, however, different from the consciousness of the Supreme, because the Supreme Consciousness is all knowledge, past, present, and future. The consciousness of the individual soul is prone to be forgetful. When he is forgetful of his real nature, he obtains education and enlightenment from the superior lessons of Krishna. But Krishna is not like the forgetful soul. If so, Krishna's teachings of Bhagavad Gita would be useless. There are 2 kinds of souls, namely the minute particle soul, Anu Atma, and the super soul, Vibhu Atma. This is also confirmed in the Katha Upanishad 1.2.20 in this way. Anor Aniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atmasya Jantor Nihito Guhayam Tam Akratu Pasyati Vita Soko Dhatu Prasadan Mahimanan Atmanaha. Both the spiritual soul, Paramatma, and the atomic soul, Jivatma, are situated on the same tree of the body, within the same heart of the living being, and only one who has become free from all material desires as well as lamentations can, by the grace of the Supreme, understand the glories of of the soul. Krishna is the fountainhead of the super soul also, as it will be disclosed in the following chapters, and Arjuna is the atomic soul, forgetful of his real nature. Therefore, he requires to be enlightened by Krishna or by his bona fide representative, the spiritual master.
Veda vinasinam nityam yaenam ajamavyayam kadam sa purushapadakam gadayati hantikam. Translation. O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? Purport. Everything has its proper utility, and a man who is situated in complete knowledge knows how and where to apply a thing for its proper utility. Similarly, violence also has its utility, and how to apply violence rests with the person in knowledge. Although the justice of the peace awards capital punishment to a person condemned for murder, the justice of the peace cannot be blamed, because he orders violence to another person according to the course of justice. In Manu Samhita, the law book of mankind, it is supported that a murderer should be condemned to death, so that in his next life he will not have to suffer for the great sin he has committed. Therefore, the king's punishment of hanging a murderer is actually beneficial. Similarly, when Krishna orders fighting, it must be concluded that violence is for supreme justice, and thus Arjuna should follow the instruction, knowing well that such violence committed in the act of fighting for Krishna is not violence at all, because at any rate the man or rather the soul cannot be killed. So for the administration of justice, so-called violence is permitted. A surgical operation is not meant to kill the patient, but to cure him. Therefore, the fighting to be executed by Arjuna at the instruction of Krishna is with full knowledge, so there is no possibility of sinful reaction. Vasam Sijina, text 22. Vasamsi jirnani yada vihaya navani gruhnati naroparani tada sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. Translation.
As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new bodies, given up new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Change of body by the automatic individual soul, atomic individual soul, is an accepted fact. Even the modern scientists who do not believe in the existence of the heart, of the soul, but at the same time cannot explain the source of energy from the heart, have to accept continuous changes of body which appear from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to youth, and again from youth to old age. From old age, the change is transferred to another body. This has already been explained in the previous verse 2.13. Transference of the atomic individual soul to another body is made possible by the grace of the super soul. The super soul fulfills the desire of the atomic soul as one friend fulfills the desire of another. The Vedas, like the Mundaka Upanishad, as well as the Svetasvara Upanishad, compare the soul and the super soul to two friendly birds sitting on the same tree. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree, and the other bird, Krishna, is simply watching his friend. Of these two birds, although they are the same in quality, one is captivated by fruits of the material tree, while the other is simply witnessing the activities of his friend. Krishna is the witnessing bird, and Arjuna is the eating bird. Although they are friends, one is still the master and the other is the servant. Forgetfulness of this relationship by atomic soul is the cause of one's changing his position from one tree to another, or from one body to another. The jiva soul is struggling very hard on the tree of the material body, but as soon as he agrees to accept the other bird as the supreme spiritual master, as Arjuna agreed to do by voluntary surrender onto Krishna for instruction, this subordinate bird immediately becomes free from all lamentations. Both the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.2 and the Svetasvatara Upanishad 4.7 confirms this.
Samane vrukshe purusho nimagno nishaya sochati muhyamana justam yada pashyati anyamisham hasya mahimana mitivita soka.
Although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way, or other, he turns his face to his friend, the Lord, and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. Arjuna has now turned his face toward their eternal friend Krishna, and is understanding the Bhagavad Gita from him. And thus, hearing from Krishna, he can understand the supreme glories of the Lord and be free from all lamentation. Arjuna is advised herewith by the Lord not to lament for the bodily change of his old grandfather and his teacher. He should rather be happy to kill their bodies in the righteous fight, so that they may be cleansed at once of all reactions from various bodily activities. One who lays down his life on the sacrificial altar or in the proper battlefield is at once cleansed of bodily reactions and promoted to a higher status of life. So there was no cause for Arjuna's lamentation.
Bhagavad Gita 2.23 Nainam chintanti sastrani nainam dahati pavakaha na chainam kledayanti apo na chochayanti marutaha. Translation: the soul can never be cut into pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. Purport: all kinds of weapons, swords, flame weapons, rain weapons, tornado weapons, etc., are unable to kill the spirit soul. It appears that there were many kinds of weapons made of earth, water, air, ether, etc. In addition to the modern weapons of fire, even the nuclear weapons of the modern age are classified as fire weapons. But formerly, there were other weapons made of all different of material elements. Fire weapons were counteracted by water weapons, which are now unknown to modern science. Nor do modern scientists have knowledge of tornado weapons. Nonetheless, the soul can never be cut into pieces, nor annihilated by any number of weapons, regardless of scientific devices. The Mayavadi cannot explain how the individual soul came into existence simply by ignorance and consequently became covered by the illusory energy. Nor was it ever possible to cut the individual souls from the original Supreme Soul. Rather, the individual souls are eternally separated parts of the Supreme Soul. Because they are atomic individual souls, eternally, Sanatana, they are prone to be covered by the illusory energy, and thus they become separated from the association of the Supreme Lord. Just as the sparks of a fire, although one in quality with the fire, are prone to be extinguished when out of the fire. In the Varaha Purana, the living entities are described as separated parts and parcel of the Supreme. They are eternally so, according to the Bhagavad Gita also. So, even after being liberated from illusion, the living entity remains a separate identity, as is evident from the teachings of the Lord to Arjuna. Arjuna became liberated by the knowledge received from Krishna, but he never became one with Krishna.
Text 24, chapter 2. Achedyoyam atahyoyam akledyo sosyevacha nitya sarvagadastanur achaloyam sanatanaha. Translation: this individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble, and can be neither burned nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. Purport: all these qualifications of the atomic soul definitely prove that the individual soul is eternally the atomic particle of the spirit whole, and he remains the same atom eternally, without change. The theory of monism is very difficult to apply in this case, because the individual soul is never expected to become one homogeneously. After liberation from material contamination, the atomic soul may prefer to remain as a spiritual spark in the effulgent rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the intelligent souls enter into the spiritual planets to associate with the Personality of Godhead. The word Sarvagata, all pervading, is significant because there is no doubt that living entities are all over God's creation. They live on the land, in the water, in the air, within the earth, and even within fire. The belief that they are sterilized in fire is not acceptable, because it is clearly stated here that the soul cannot be burned by fire. Therefore, there is no doubt that there are living entities also in the sun planet, with suitable bodies to live there. If the sun globe is uninhabited, then the word Sarvagata, living everywhere, becomes meaningless. Text 24, chapter 2. Avyaktoyam achintyoyam avikaryoyam uchyate tasmadevam viditvainam nanusochitamarhasi.
It is said that the soul is. Isn't that text 25? Do we change 25? Okay. It is said that the soul is invincible, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. As described previously, the magnitude of the soul is so small, for our material calculation that he cannot be seen by the most powerful be seen even by the most powerful microscope. Therefore he is invisible. As far as the soul's existence is concerned, no one can establish his existence experimentally beyond the proof of Shruti or Vedic wisdom. We have to accept this truth because there is no other source of understanding the existence of the soul. Although it is a fact by perception, there are many good things we have to accept solely on the grounds of superior authority. No one can deny the existence of his father based upon the authority of his mother. There is no source of understanding the identity of the father except by the authority of the mother. Similarly, there is no there's no source of understanding the soul except by studying the Vedas. In other words, the soul is inconceivable by human experimental knowledge. The soul is consciousness, and conscious, that also is the statement of the Vedas, and we have to accept that. Unlike the bodily changes, there is no change in the soul. As eternally unchangeable, the soul remains atomic in comparison to the infinite supreme soul. The supreme soul is infinite, and the atomic soul is infinitesimal. Therefore, the infinitesimal soul, being unchangeable, can never become equal to the infinite soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This concept is repeated in the Vedas in different ways just to confirm the stability of the stability of the conception of the soul. Repetition of something is necessary in order that we understand the matter thoroughly without error.
Bhagavad Gita 2.26 Atha chainam nityajatam nityam va manyase mritam tathapi tvam mahabaho nainam sochitam arhasi. Translation: If, however, you think that the soul or the symptoms of life will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. Purport: There is always a class of philosophers almost akin to the Buddhists who do not believe in the separate existence of the soul beyond the body. When Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, it appears that such philosophers existed, and they were known as the Lokayatikas and Vaibhasikas. Such philosophers maintain that life symptoms take place at a certain mature condition of material combination. The modern material scientists and materialist philosophers also think similarly. According to them, the body is a combination of physical elements, and at a certain stage the life symptoms develop by interaction of the physical and chemical elements. The science of anthropology is based on this philosophy. Currently, many pseudo-religions, now becoming fashionable in America, are also adhering to this philosophy, as are the nihilistic, non-devotional Buddhist sects. Even if Arjuna did not believe in the existence of the soul, as in the Vaibhashika philosophy, there would still have been no cause for lamentation. No one laments the loss of a certain bulk of chemicals and stops discharging his prescribed duty. On the other hand, in modern science and scientific warfare, so many tons of chemicals are wasted for achieving victory over the enemy. According to the Vaibhashika philosophy, the so called soul or Atma vanishes along with the deterioration of the body. So, in any case, whether Arjuna accepted the Vedic conclusion that there is an atomic soul nor he did not believe in the existence of the soul, he had no reason to lament. According to this theory, since there are so many living entities generating out of matter every moment, and so many of them are being vanquished every moment, there is no need to grieve for such incidents. If there were no rebirth for the soul, Arjuna had no reason to be afraid of being affected by sinful reactions his killing due to his killing his grandfather and teacher. But at the same time, Krishna sarcastically addressed Arjuna as Mahabahu, mighty armed, because he at least did not accept the theory of the Vaibhashikas, which leaves aside the Vedic wisdom. As a Kshatriya, Arjuna belonged to the Vedic culture, and it behooved him to continue to follow his principles.
Text 27, chapter 2. Jatasya hi dhruvor dhruvam janma mrutasya cha tasmad apariharyade natvam sochitam arhasi. Translation. One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Purport. One has to take birth according to one's activities of life, and after finishing the one term of activities, one has to die to take birth for the next. In this way, one is going through one cycle of birth and death after another without liberation. This cycle of birth and death does not, however, support unnecessary murder, slaughter, and war. But at the same time, violence and war are inevitable factors in human society for keeping law and order. The Battle of Kurukshetra, being the will of the Supreme, was an inevitable event, and to fight for the right cause is the duty of a Kshatriya. Why should he be afraid of or aggrieved at the death of his relatives, since he was discharging his proper duty? He did not deserve to break the law, thereby becoming subjected to the reactions of sinful acts of which he was so afraid. By avoiding the discharge of his proper duty, he would not be able to stop the death of his relatives, and he would be degraded due to his selection of the wrong path of action. Text 28, chapter 2. Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata avyakta nidanani eva tatra ka paridevana.
All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation, accepting that there are two classes of philosophers, one believing in the existence of the soul, and the other not believing in the existence of the soul? There is no cause for lamentation in other in either in either case. Non-believers in the existence of the soul are called atheists by followers of Vedic wisdom. Yet even if For argument's sake, we accept the atheistic theory. This is still no cause for lamentation. Apart from the separate existence of the soul, the material elements remain unmanifest before creation. From this subtle state of non-manifestation comes manifestation, just as from ether air is generated, from air fire is generated, from fire water is generated, and from water earth become manifested. From earth the many varieties many varieties of manifestations take place. For example, a big skyscraper manifested from the earth. Big skyscraper manifested from the earth. When it is dismantled, the manifestation becomes again unmanifested and remains as atoms in the ultimate stage. The law of conservation of energy remains, but course of time things are manifested and unmanifested. That is the difference. Then what cause is there for lamentation? Either the stage of manifestation or unmanifestation, somehow or other, even in the unmanifested stage, there are things are not lost, both at the beginning and at the end. All elements remain unmanifested, and only in the middle are they manifested. And this does not make any real material difference. And if we accept the Vedic conclusion as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, that these material bodies are perishable in due course of time, but that the soul is eternal, then we must remember always that the body is like a dress. Therefore, why lament the changing of a dress? The material body has no factual existence in relation of the eternal soul to the eternal soul. It is something like a dream. In a dream, we may think of flying in the skies or sitting on a chariot as a king. But when we wake up, we can see that we are neither in the sky nor seated on the chariot. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of non-existence of the material body. Therefore, in either case, whether one believes in the existence of the soul or one does not believe in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation or for loss of the body.
Bhagavad Gita 2.29 Ascharyavat pasyati kaschid enam Ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanya Ascharyavat chainam anya srunoti sutvapi enam vedana chaiva kaschid. Translation: Some look on the soul as amazing. Some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. Purport: since Gita Upanishad is largely based on the principles of the Upanishads, it is not surprising to also find this passage in the Katha Upanishad 1.2.7. Sravanyapi bahubhir yona labhya srunvantopi bahavo yam na vidyu आश्चर्यो वक्ता कुशलो श्यलब्धा आश्चर्यो ज्ञाता kusalalu nishista. The fact that the atomic soul is within the body of a gigantic animal, in the body of a gigantic banyan tree, and also in the microbic germs, millions and billions of which occupy only an inch of space, is certainly very amazing. Men with a poor fund of knowledge and men who are not austere cannot find the wonders of the individual atomic spark of spirit, even though it is explained by the greatest authority of knowledge, who imparted lessons even to Brahma, the first living being in the universe, owing to a gross material conception of things. Most men in this age cannot imagine how such a small particle can become both so great and so small. So men look at the soul proper as wonderful either by constitution or by description. Illusioned by the material energy, people are so engrossed in subject matters for sense gratification that they have very little time to understand the question of self-understanding, even though it is a fact that without this self-understanding, all activities result in ultimate defeat in the struggle for existence. Perhaps they have no idea that one must think of the soul and thus make a solution to the material miseries. Some people inclined to hear about the soul who are inclined to hear about the soul may be attending lectures in good association, but sometimes owing to ignorance they are misguided by acceptance of the super soul and the atomic soul as one without distinction of magnitude. It is very difficult to find a man who perfectly understand the position of the super soul, the atomic soul, the respective functions and relationships, and all other major and minor details. And it is still more difficult to find a man who has actually derived full benefit from knowledge of the soul, and is able to describe the position of the soul in different aspects. But if somehow or other one is able to understand the subject matter of the soul, then one's life is successful. The easiest process for understanding the subject matter of self, however, is to accept the statements of the Bhagavad Gita spoken by the greatest authority, Lord Krishna, without being deviated by otherwise. But it also requires the greatest deal of The easiest process for understanding the subject matter of self, however, is to accept the statements of Bhagavad Gita spoken by the greatest authority, Lord Krishna, without being deviated by other theories. But it also requires a great deal of penance and sacrifice, either in this life or in the previous ones. Before one is able to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna can, however, be known as such by the causeless mercy of the pure devotee and by no other way.
Text 30, chapter 2. Dehi nityam avadyoyam dehi sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam sochitam arhasi. Translation: O descendant of Bharata, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore, you need not grieve for any living being. Purport: the Lord now concludes the chapter of instruction on the immutable spirit soul. In describing the immortal soul in various ways, Lord Krishna establishes that the soul is immortal and the body is temporary. Therefore, Arjuna, as a Kshatriya, should not abandon his duty out of fear that his grandfather and teacher Bhishma and Drona will die in the battle. On the authority of Sri Krishna, one has to believe that there is a soul different from the material body, not that there is no such thing as soul, or that living symptoms develop at a certain stage of material maturity resulting from the interaction of chemicals. Though the soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged, but at the time of war, it is not discouraged when there is actual need for it. That need must be justified in terms of the sanction of the Lord and not capriciously. Text 31, chapter 2. Swadharmamapi chaveksha navikampitamarhasi dharmyadi yuddhachayo anyakshatriyasya navidyate.
Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. Purport. Out of the 4 orders of social administration, the second order for matter of the good administration is called Kshatriya. Shak means hurt. One who gives protection from harm is called Kshatriya. Triya means to give protection. The Kshatriyas are trained for killing in the forest. A Kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to the present day of Kshatriya kings by the Kshatriya kings of Jaipur state. The Kshatriyas are specially trained for challenging and killing because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor. Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyasi or sannyasa or renunciation. Non-violence in politics may be diplomacy, but it is never a factor or a principle. In the religious law books, it is stated in the battlefield of King. It is stated in the battlefield of King Kshatriya. King or Kshatriya, while fighting another king envious of him, is eligible for achieving the heavenly planets after death. As the Brahmanas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire. Therefore, killing on the battlefield of religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence. Because everyone is benefited by the religious principles involved, the animal sacrifice gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another. And the Kshatriyas killed on the battlefield also attain heavenly planets, as do the Brahmanas who attain them by offering sacrifice. There are 2 kinds of svadharmas, specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties as a particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. When one is liberated, one's svadharma, specific duty, becomes spiritual and is not in the material bodily concept. In the bodily conception of life, there are specific duties for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas respectively, and such duties are unavoidable. And such but it's just such duty when such duties are unavoidable. Swadharma is ordained by the Lord, and this it will be clarified in the 4th chapter. On the bodily plane, Swadharma is called Varnasrama Dharma, or man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of Vanashrama Dharma, or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body obtained, discharging one's one specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of higher authorities serves to elevate one to a higher status of life.
Bhagavad Gita 2.32 Yadrachaya chopapanam swargadwaram apavritam sukhina kshatriya partha labhyante yuddham idrasham. Translation: O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. Purport: As Supreme Teacher of the world, Lord Krishna condemns the attitude of Krishna, who said, I do not find any job in this fighting. Any good in this fighting. I do not find any good in this fighting. It will cause perpetual habitation in hell. Such statements by Arjuna were due to ignorance only. He wanted to become non-violent in the discharge of his specific duty. For a Kshatriya to be on the battlefield and to become non-violent is the philosophy of the fools. In the Parashara Smriti, or religious codes made by Parashara, the great sage and father of Vyasadeva, it is stated, Kshatriyo hi praja rakshan shastra pani pradandayan nirjitya para sainyadi kshitim dharmena palayet. The Kshatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kinds of difficulties, and for that reason he has to apply violence in suitable cases for law and order. Therefore he has to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings, and thus with religious principle he should rule over the world. Considering all aspects, Arjuna had no reason to refrain from fighting. If he should conquer his enemies, he would enjoy the kingdom, and if he should die in the battle, he would be elevated to the heavenly planets, whose doors are wide open to him. Fighting would be for his benefit in either case.
Text 33, chapter 2. Atachetvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi tataswadharmam kirtim cha hitva papam avapsyasi. Translation: If, however, you do not perform this religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. Purport: Arjuna was a famous fighter, and he attained fame by fighting many great demigods, including even Lord Shiva. After fighting and defeating Lord Shiva in the dress of a hunter, Arjuna pleased the Lord and received as a reward a weapon called Pashupata Astra. Everyone knew that he was a great warrior. Even Dronacharya gave him benedictions and awarded him the special weapon by which he could kill even his teacher. So he was credited with so many military certificates from many authorities, including his adoptive father Indra, the heavenly king. But if he abandoned the battle, not only would he neglect his specific duty as a Kshatriya, but he would lose all his fame and good name, and thus prepare his royal road to hell. In other words, he would go to hell not by fighting but by withdrawing from battle. Text 34, chapter 2. Akirtim chapi bhutani katayishyanti te avyayam sambhavitasya cha kirtir maranad atirichyate.
People will always speak. People will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. Both as friend and philosophers to Arjuna, Lord Krishna now gives his final judgment regarding Arjuna's refusal to fight. The Lord says, Arjuna, if you leave the battlefield before the battle even begins, people will call you a coward. And if you think that people may call you bad names, but that you will save your life by fleeing the battlefields, then my advice is that you do better than die in the battle. For a respectable man by you, ill fame is worse than death. So you should not flee for fear of your life. Better to die in the battle. That will save you from this ill fame of misusing my friendship and from losing your prestige in society. So the final judgment of the Lord was for Arjuna to die in the battle and not with Shah.
Bhagavad Gita 2.35 Bhayadranad uparatam masyante tvam maharatha yesam cha tvam bahumato bhutva yasyasi laghavam. Translation: The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. Purport: Lord Krishna continued to give his verdict to Arjuna. Do not think that the great generals like Drona, Duryodhana, Karna, and other contemporaries will think that you have left the battle out of compassion for your brothers and grandfather. They will think that you have left out of fear for your life, and thus their high estimation of your personality will go to hell. Avacha vadamscha bahun vadisyanti tavahita nindantastava samarthyam tatho dukkataram nukim. Translation: Your enemies will describe you in any unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? Purport: Lord Krishna was astonished in the beginning at Arjuna's uncalled for plea for compassion and described his compassion as befitting the non-Aryans. Now, in so many words, he has proved his statements against Arjuna's so-called compassion.